Are you okay with the lighting on your face? Because there's like a big
there's not anything
shadow.
I can do about it.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I'll
That's why
just
I
put that
wanted to
out.
do it a little earlier in the day because this room has lighting issues. Well, I have over-the-ear headset that, I'll wear like if I'm working with a client or whatever. But since I'm doing the earbuds, I didn't have to get the headset, which I have wrapped around the microphone.
Plus, it's a really good hair day.
It is a good hair day.
So you don't want to mess with that. And welcome to Coffee and UFOs with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hey, how's it going, Alan?
Things are fantastic now that you're here with me.
It is so cool to be with you. I love you to death. So I'm looking forward to our little 10-minute segment.
Yes, our coffee shop converse. So for anyone who doesn't know, Dr. Rita Louise is an intuit. She's a clairvoyant, and she is an expert on ancient aliens and human origins. I would call you an aliens human origins detective.
I like that.
That's what your work feels like. It feels like you're doing detective work because you're not saying I'm a paleontologist. You're not saying I'm a whateverologist. You're looking at all these different pieces and putting them together in a really fascinating way. Yeah. So you can check out her work. What's her website anyway?
Soulhealer.com. Soulhealer.com.
Okay. So first question is, have you seen a UFO?
Embarrassing as this is to say, considering the line of work that I'm in, no. Not one.
Okay. What about a cryptid or a ghost?
Ghost, definitely. I did ghost hunting for a while and actually wrote an entire book about ghost spirits and attached entities. It's called Dark Angels. And, so have had, and actually I'll throw this in, I grew up in a haunted house. There was the dead guy that lived in the basement that nobody would go into. Then in college, I moved to a house that, after I moved in, I found out had been the local funeral parlor.
Oh my!
Just a little bit of activity there.
I was going to ask you about the first house, but that sounds like really like high energy paranormal.
Yeah, there was a lot of activity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything specific happened that was kind of shocking or just like stirring for you?
Well, I mean, it was a fairly common occurrence to have. So it was a old house that had been split with the upstairs level being one apartment, and then the downstairs was a business. Mm-hmm. And then there was the outside door, and you would open that up, a little teeny hallway, and two doors. One went into the business, one went to a stairwell that went upstairs. And you would hear the air blow as if someone opened the outside door, because you would hear this like suction vacuum thing happening. Mm-hmm. And you'd wait. Do they knock it at my door? Do they open the door to the business downstairs? What's going to happen? Nothing. And then, this is where it would get fun. You'd hear, up the stairs.
Oh, man.
And that's when I would turn the stereo up even louder, because even though I lived in haunted houses and even though I've done ghost hunting as an adult, I'm still scared of ghosts.
But it is an unknown thing. It's natural to have some fear or at least trepidation when having these encounters, because of all the experts, right? Experts in the paranormal, investigators, no one can ever say, I know exactly what ghosts are. They might say, I know what God is. They might say, I know what angels are. But I've never gotten a definitive answer that was convincing that they knew exactly what a ghost is.
And see, I have more confidence in my description of what a ghost is versus an angel or
that's interesting.
Some other stuff, because to me, there's two different categories of ghosts. There are individuals who have died and not crossed over, so they are spirits that walk the earth. I'm going to bring in my Star Trek terminology, and they're just at a different frequency. They're in a different time-space continuum.
Right.
Than us. But then there are people that have died and crossed over, like gone to heaven, go wherever they go, have the life review, as some people suggest, and they come back and visit. So I've had relatives show up, or people be, like this couple has this activity happening in their house. And so you go to their location, but they just had a new baby. And so who's really showing up is grandma. Well, grandma's not some old evil spirit that hasn't transitioned. It's grandma went to wherever grandma's going to go,
right,
and coming back and checking in.
So so a ghost is coming back, or just some ghosts are coming back?
So there are ones that haven't really transitioned. So they're just still kind of walking the earth. And usually it's the nasty, mean ones, that are going to throw things around and create problems.
What we might say is like a poltergeist.
Correct. That kind of thing. But then there is this whole separate group of people that have died that have, they say when you have the life review, it gives you the opportunity to let go of all the things that have hurt you. And so you as spirit and you as a person have evolved, so now you are in a good place, but these people will come back. And so there's not any malice. So just because there's somebody there doesn't mean it's a nasty, mean, earthbound spirit.
What do you think is the future? And you can choose either one of these, of ufological investigations or paranormal investigations, or what do you think is missing that we need to have now?
Well, I mean, for paranormal, I think the biggest thing that we're missing is equipment that will measure and register things that are subtle energy. And so when I make that comment, I'm sure if they've listened to your show, they've heard words like the auric field and chakras, and so we still don't have equipment that can register and measure that, and so, but if we had something that could measure subtle energy, then they would be able to utilize something with that kind of sensitivity to identify and register ghosts, because they are in that subtle energy plane. If you're an intuitive, you can see that kind of information. And so I'm making the assumption that they are vibrating in a similar frequency, that makes them be observable. The whole UFO thing, I mean, you would like for disclosure to happen.
We can't really rely on that.
I mean, there are those people that say that disclosure is going to happen from the people, and that there will be just a mindset, a change in the mindset where more people than not will believe that UFOs exist.
I think we're on our way. I think we're definitely on our way in that regard, for sure. I don't know if enough people believing will just sort of manifest that. Other than like what I see now, I see younger Congress people that are putting pressure on the military because they want to know what's going on. And they're doing that publicly, not behind the scenes like John McCain did during the Phoenix Lights. They're out posting like, hey, I just sent this letter to your military saying, I want to know about UFOs. Like Mark Walker and I forget, there was was a few months ago, a bunch of Congress people had signed a letter as well. I just can't remember the names.
But there's a certain level of comfortableness. If you said 30 years ago that you were psychic or that you did ghost hunting, they would just put you in the loony bin pile. Or that you believed in UFO or you had a UFO encounter, they would just put you in the loony bin pile.
Yeah.
Now for me personally, it's like, I'll tell people, it's like, yeah, I used to do ghost hunting. It's like, oh, really? Well, tell me about that versus you're some weird, evil person and we need to keep away from you.
I totally agree. I think there's so much more acceptability. Although recently somebody in my family at a family gathering was like, when are you going to stop posting that woo-woo stuff on your Facebook page? And I was like, look, if you don't like aliens, you don't have to look at my Facebook page. You know?
Mhm.
So and there's always going to be people who aren't quite there, who or just can't accept it until they see it. You know.
Right. You know, but with any scientific theory, someone will put the information out, and it usually takes a generation or two for it to be embraced. So like Darwin's theory of evolution, it was extremely controversial when he came out with it, and it took a couple of generations for it to become a more mainstream concept.
Sure, you still have detractors, but they're such a
That's
small
because it's
minority.
That's because it's aliens. But
Right. Well, that's another interesting thing, is that because people are more open-minded in a sense, right? They're not so restricted to perhaps religious dogma per se, and so they're more open-minded to other explanations for how things came to be, including ancient alien intervention.
Mhm.
Because of that, that also sort of undermines his theory of evolution as well,
Mhm.
because people use ancient aliens as an argument against Darwinianism. But I think it's not necessarily, they're not uh, necessarily exclusive, mutually exclusive.
Well, it's interesting. If I don't mind me, you don't mind me jumping in here.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm in my Stepping Out of Eden book. I mean, I end up hitting that point head on, because when you look at the mythic record, there's not one conversation that says we evolved. And not that I'm saying that there isn't a certain level of evolution that happens. I mean, that seems obvious. But every myth from every culture around the world says we were created by God.
But we do know that there are a multitude of hominids that were sprouting up on this planet and branching off. And at some point, the ancient alien theory is that there was an intervention that catapulted us to the next level.
Unless you sit there and say they have intervened since day one.
So they planted the seeds.
Yes. How did we get eyeballs?
Yeah. Well,
we went from like no eyeballs to warm blood, cold-blooded to warm-blooded. I mean, evolution doesn't explain that.
No, and you have cephalopods, right, that are very intelligent, but very bizarre. Genetically, they're different than us. Really fascinating. So clearly,
and then platypuses are just like some experiment that survived.
Seriously, though, that's one of the weirdest. Do you ever see the movie Dogma with directed by Kevin Smith?
I've seen the movie. Yeah,
it was a long time. It came out in '99, something like that. But the whole movie is sort of about creation, and Alanis Morissette is God. But in the beginning, it says something about like please forgive us for the platypus, or and I was like, that's great. It was really clever, because it really is bizarre. Like, science can explain many things, but every once in a while there's this anomaly that just doesn't seem to make sense.
But if you sit there and look at some of the mythic creatures that come out of Greek mythology, they're the best documented. You have the centaurs, and you have the three-headed. They got all kinds of weird stuff. And was it a science project that just didn't survive? And was the platypus a science project that did survive?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. There are also therianthropes. And
all right, I'm not sure I know what that is.
Well, like animal-human mixtures. So, a body of a centaur, right? Something like the horse's body and then human top. We might have something like that, like in the Bigfoot, right? Could the Bigfoot be some sort of experiment from days long gone by?
Possible. But what I think is really interesting in contemporary society is there's reports of, I forget what country they were from, but they're in China, and they mixed human and pig DNA something or human and ape DNA. And I'm like, woohoo, Planet of the Apes starting here. And so the stories that come out of mythology, we're starting to do those stories in our own scientific areas.
And we're not even that scientifically advanced in the grand scheme of things. But I think you're right. I'll have to check it out later. But I think before the human ape genetic splicing that was done in China, I think there was a pig experiment.
Yeah, there was a pig too.
That. Yeah.
But the ape one is kind of like,
that's freaky.
Where's Charlton Heston when you need him,
Right. No, seriously, because how far are we realistically from taking apes that are apes now and just tweaking their genetics and increasing their intelligence? I mean, and if a country like China has no checks and balances on that, who knows what kind of zoos and Jurassic Parks will be popping up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. My thought, exactly. And it just takes me back to, well, is that how we came into being in the first place? Well,
it certainly isn't impossible, because if we're doing it, it's totally possible that another intelligent species could do it.
But the mythic record suggests that that's exactly what happened.
Exactly what happened. Yeah, fascinating. Dr. Rita Louise, thanks again.
Thanks for having me. I love talking to you.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You just came out with a recent book.
The Stepping Out of Eden book.
Stepping Out of Eden book. Do you have any conferences or talks coming up at all in relation to that?
I will be at the Four Winds 4 Points Expo in Memphis, September 21st and 22nd, and I will be at the History Haunts and Legends Conference in November 3rd, 6th, the first Saturday of November. Gotcha. But I have another book that I'm working on finishing up, but who knows when it'll actually come out, because I think I'm going through a regular publisher on it, so who knows. But that's about talking about how empathic people seem to attract parasitic individuals in their lives, and how to recognize them and what to do about it.
That's a real problem.
It's a huge problem.
Someone just recently asked me about that too. Like, why are these people coming to me? And it's kind of a shame, but that's interesting. Well, so we can definitely talk about that in the future.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of Coffee and UFOs, two of my favorite things. If you want to find out more about us, follow us on social media, but of course, like and subscribe down below if you appreciated today's content. And for more, thanks again for tuning in. Follow me on Instagram @ParanormalNow or on Twitter, @paranormal_now.